Afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Jim ZEHREN, President of City Club. We're glad you're with us for our program today, this Friday, the 27th of June, 2008. Our program today features a debate regarding the proposed $4.2 billion project to replace the existing I-5 bridge over the Columbia River and to modify related freeway lanes and access ramps. The debate will feature one of our elected Metro Councilors and a noted local economist. Before we begin our program, however, a few announcements. First, in consideration of those sitting close to you and our radio and television audiences, please silence your cell phones and anything else you have that may make noise. Please know that next Friday, July 4th, there will be no Friday Forum because of the holiday. However, join us here at City Club the following Friday, June 11th, when the program will feature a presentation called The Big Sort, Why the Clustering of Like-Minded Americans is Tearing Us Apart, by author Bill Bishop. Proves to be a very interesting presentation. City Club has great partners in presenting these Friday Forums. In fact, these Friday Forums would not be possible without the generous support of our corporate sponsors. This quarter sponsors are Neil Kelly Company, City Center Parking, West Coast Bank, and the law firm of Stowe Reeves LLP. We thank them all for their support. And I'm especially pleased that joining us as our special guest today is Wally Van Valkenburg, Portland office managing partner of our corporate sponsor, Stowe Reeves. Wally, please stand and be recognized, and thank you. A few other announcements. Citizen salons. Our summer season citizen salons are off and running. Coming up on July 10th, Carla Stahlbusch, Vice President of Stahlbusch Island Farms, will lead a discussion about how agriculture, energy, and immigration policy are intersecting. The backdrop for this discussion will be a fully catered meal at the Sauvie Island home of Sharon Van Sickle Robbins, a member of our Board of Governors. Sharon, you've been busy. Another upcoming salon will take advantage of Portland's summer scenery, and that is the Portland Park Parlay, which will occur at the Rose-Laden Peninsula Park in North Portland. This salon will include a barbecue picnic featuring Zeri Santner, Director of Portland Parks, who was our speaker right here last week. And our New Leaders Council is offering tickets to this salon at less than half the price of the other salons. Consider these and other exciting citizen salons that are listed in the City Club's website and make a reservation by calling the City Club's offices. Now, for our final announcement, please know that the City Club Research Board is still recruiting volunteers for our fall ballot measure studies. Although no one yet knows what ballot measures will be on the ballot this fall, the Research Board is getting ready now to prepare reports and make recommendations regarding fall ballot measures. Agreeing to serve on a ballot measure study committee is an 8-week commitment starting at the end of July and reporting back here at a Friday Forum in September or October. These ballot measure study committees are a great way to get involved in City Club and the public process. You'll meet very interesting people both on the committee and those you interview. You'll learn a lot about an important issue. You'll make a contribution to the body politic, and you'll be done in 2 months. So if you've ever wondered about doing this kind of thing but never have, you're a City Club member, take the plunge, and if you're not a member, join and then take the plunge. But hurry, as applications must be in by next Thursday. That's the deadline, July 3rd. Now to our program. The Portland region has a somewhat complex and mixed history of dealing with major freeway and transportation systems, and a little historical perspective seems appropriate. In 1943, then famous and perhaps now infamous New York Park Commissioner Robert Moses was brought to Portland to map out the initial interstate highway system for our city. The result was the basic I-5 and I-405 freeway system that we have today, including Markham Bridge over the Willamette River and the I-5 segment along the east bank of the Willamette that many today would like to remove, bury, or move further east. In 1974, led by then City Commissioner Neil Goldschmidt, the City Council voted to reverse the city's support for the construction of the then planned Mount Hood Freeway that would extend essentially from the Markham Bridge along Powell Boulevard to Gresham. And the money freed up by this vote of the City Council ultimately was used to help construct the very first MAX line from downtown Portland to Gresham. A subsequent vote on the Portland side of the Columbia did result in the funding of the West Side MAX from downtown Portland to Hillsborough, and other non-voter approved financing has resulted in the construction of the Red Line MAX to the airport, the Yellow Line MAX from downtown Portland to the Expo Center, and the current MAX projects on I-205 and along the Portland Transit Mall. However, in between these voter-approved and non-voter-approved MAX projects, citizens in Vancouver and in the three-county metro area on the Portland side of the Columbia several times rejected funding proposals for extension of MAX to Vancouver and a line from downtown Portland southeast towards Clackamas Town Center. And while all of this was going on, Portland, perhaps more so than any other metro in the country, adopted a regional growth strategy based on a conviction that widening freeways does not ultimately solve the freeway congestion problem, because of the belief that the more you widen freeways, the more people will come to drive on them, and in so doing, the further out people will move, thereby exacerbating urban sprawl. And then finally, in the last year or so, we increasingly have been hearing about the need to alter our basic ways of life in order to reduce the carbon footprint of this culture we have in a world of skyrocketing petroleum prices on a planet experiencing devastating climate change. So against all of this backdrop, we're now reading about a proposal to relieve severe and increasing congestion on I-5 on and heading onto the Columbia River Bridge connecting Portland to Vancouver, with a proposed new bridge, roadway, and access ramp system, apparently with light rail extended to Vancouver, but that doesn't seem exactly clear to some of us, and perhaps with as many as 12 lanes, although that isn't really clear either, and perhaps having the height and design of the bridge being constrained by Pearson Field, the small airfield on the Vancouver side of the river, although that seems to be unclear too. But everybody seems to be saying that the cost of this project would be about $4.2 billion with a B. More money that certainly has ever been spent on any public or private project in the Portland area. And we read that unless we take this kind of bold action, the bridge congestion problem will end up being, if it is not already, the worst bottleneck along I-5, the I-5 corridor on the West Coast, thereby crippling our local economy and our ability to move goods and services in our city and region. Yet it seems that others are starting to question the basic underlying assumptions of the build it solution and are reframing the questions in ways that sound familiar to many of us that know something about Portland's history. Indeed, it makes one wonder if we're starting to have another Keep Portland Different debate in the mix. Well, luckily we have two people with us today who know a lot about this subject, and they're going to help us sort it out. And they're going to debate it in front of us and address our questions. Before introducing our two speakers, let me explain the ground rules for this little debate. It's pretty simple. One of our debaters will speak first for 10 minutes. The other debater will also speak for 10 minutes, and then each speaker will have a 5-minute rebuttal in the order that they first spoke. After the rebuttals, we will have a question from our board host today, and then we will end with questions from the floor. So, our debaters today will be Metro Councilor Rex Burkholder and Portland economist Joe Cortright. I'm going to introduce them both, and then we'll proceed with their initial statements. Rex Burkholder was first elected to the Metro Council in 2000 and elected to a second term in 2004. He represents District 5 in Multnomah County. He has taught high school science and served as the faculty of the Office of Student Development at Portland State. He also helped found and served as the policy director of the Bicycle Transportation Alliance. Now, he currently chairs the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, JPACT, for those of you who know about such things, the key transportation funding committee for the Portland-Vancouver metro area. And he also serves on other transportation committees, including serving as Metro's representative on the 39-member bi-state coordinating committee that's been looking at this I-5 issue. Rex has a bachelor's degree in biology from PSU and a master's in urban and environmental policy from Tufts University outside of Boston. Now, Rex also tells me that he first started riding his bike at age 5, and it remains his #1 way of getting around inside the city. He also plays the 4-string tenor guitar, and he says he reads the comics every single day. And Rex has also been a City Club member since 2000. I think I've got that right. So Rex, welcome. Our other debater is Joe Cortright. Joe Cortright is an economist with Impresa, a Portland consulting firm specializing in regional economic analysis, innovation, and industry clusters. Joe is a non-resident senior fellow with the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. He also is the chief economic analyst for both the Oregon Business Plan, a private sector effort to develop the state's economy, and CEOs for Cities, a national organization of urban leaders. Joe is the author of numerous reports and publications, particularly regarding industry clusters, and has written extensively on the migration of talented young workers among U.S. metropolitan areas in a series entitled The Young and Restless. His work is quoted regularly in publications ranging from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times to the Economist, Business Week, and USA Today. Joe is a graduate of Lewis and Clark College and holds a master's in public policy from UC Berkeley. Now, Joe tells me that you can't really know him without knowing that he has a twin, Bob, who works for the State Land Conservation Development Commission in Salem, or Department in Salem. And he also tells me that he worked as an intern for the City Club in 1976 when he was a student at Lewis and Clark for longtime club member Gus Masdorf. Is Gus here by any chance? He's often with us. And then he likes to play pétanque, which, as I understand, is the French version of bocce ball. Joe Cortright is a former City Club member, but I think he might be inclined to renew his membership depending on what kind of reception you give him. So, Joe, welcome. So we'll start with Rex Burkholder's initial presentation for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Jim, and welcome everyone. Usually being a transportation geek is a fairly lonely life. We don't usually have crowds like this to come and talk about transportation. But transportation does impact all our lives in very many different ways and in very deep ways. One is the number one, actually, for most people, the number one cost of living is actually transportation, even more than housing. If people make less than 60% of the average income, anyway. I'm trying to think about how do you talk about such a big, huge, complex project in 10 minutes, Jim? That's going to be a tough one here. But transportation is important. I left a flyer in the back because Metro, as you know, is the regional planning agency. And the flyer in the back is talking about the regional transportation plan that we're working on right now that is looking at how do we deal with the issues of global warming, aging infrastructure, changing population, growing population as part of that change, and other issues. How do we deal with that in today's world and do it in a way that makes sense and that we can afford? That's the Regional Transportation Plan, and within that context, we have a project that's being proposed here. Now, this project is big, and it's big because the river is big, and I think we need to remember that. The actual number of, even if we go as big as the possible plan has studied, which is 12 lanes, that's less than a 1% expansion in the region's freeway system. So it's not a very large change in the freeway system, but because it crosses the second largest river in the United States, it's going to be a difficult project and an expensive one just by nature. I think it's really appropriate that we are following the adoption of the report here on the business environment because if you heard there, aging infrastructure, transportation, key challenges for our business environment. We are a port region. We export, one of the larger exporting areas for the country, a fairly large import business as well. We have a high percentage of manufacturing, higher than is typical for a city our size. Those goods have to get in and get out of this region. So transportation is a key issue. Now, let me just talk a little bit about the process that we've got, how we got here. I am one member, as Jim mentioned, of a 39-member task force that was put together by the Department of Transportations of Oregon and Washington. And it's been a long process. This is the culmination of 10 years. Luckily, I've only been on this committee for 3 because we met for 4 to 6 hours at a time to go through all the information that's developed to try to analyze, understand this kind of project. So we've had 3 years of work done by a large team of consultants working with the DOTs, this 39-member task force, trying to understand what is the problem and what might be some intelligent solutions to that problem. I must admit, I came to it as a skeptic. I live in the in the, not fairy tale land, but the wonderful land of inner city Portland, where I get to ride my bike everywhere I go. I have grocery stores within 2 blocks. My kid's school was 3 blocks away. I'm able to commute a half mile to work. And what is freeway congestion to me? But being part of this process and having to, well, half of it is having to travel to Vancouver for meetings in the evening. And the last one, it took 1 hour and 45 minutes to get from Portland to Vancouver to attend the 4-hour meeting to talk about the project. The realization that we have 2 bridges crossing this very large river, connecting 400,000 plus people who live north of the river and the jobs that are there with the rest of the region. And think about the Willamette River. In the same physical distance, the number of miles, we have 10 bridges with 45 lanes for traffic to cross the Willamette River, to connect East and West Portland, to connect the northern part of the region and this part of the region. We have 2 bridges. Right now they have 14 lanes on them. Okay, so here's a challenge that we have. And the congestion is not just Vancouver congestion anymore. It may have been that way 20 years ago. People living in Vancouver and working in Portland. Today, on my way down here on my bicycle, I went underneath the I-5. I-5 is stopped and stop and go traffic at 11:30 in the morning. Much of that traffic on that road are trucks. They are trying to move during that middle part of the day that supposedly is uncongested, right? It's only supposed to be busy at rush hour. Well, our rush hours are expanding, and that's one of the key findings of this report. And that will continue to expand if we do nothing. And so we'll end up with, the report showed, or it projected 15 hours of congestion a day from our 6 hours that we have today. So here's a major issue. Today, there's over 600,000 hours of truck delay. And as Mr. Jeff Swanson from Snitzer testified to us, he said their cost of a truck on the road is between $2 and $2.30 a minute. So multiply that times 644,000 hours. I don't know what the number is, but it's a big one, a big cost to society, big impact on our economy. I know I'm running out of time, so real quickly, one of the issues that's been raised up is how does this fit with the new climate change issue that we have to deal with? When the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change put together by the United Nations actually has a position paper on transportation. How do you deal with transportation? Well, here's what they say, because they recognize you need to move people and goods. How do you do that in a carbon responsible way? The first thing they say is fix your existing infrastructure before you build new. Check. This project is fixing existing infrastructure. 2, it says provide alternatives. This project proposes a light rail connection to Vancouver, the last major center in the region that does not have high-speed rail or high-speed transit connecting it. 3rd, it says manage that demand. And here's the secret here, it's not a secret, is that the only way this bridge will be built is if we can collect money through tolls, because no one has the cash on hand to build a project of this size. So tolling is going to be an essential part of it. Tolls can be a marvelous tool to manage demand. Think of, well, in the old days, I'm old enough to remember, don't make a long distance call during the day, okay, because it was really expensive. Now we do peak load pricing for things like electricity. We also do it for large users of water. We use it for a lot of reasons to try to reduce that demand because we know the avoided cost is worth it. And the study and the research has shown on this bridge that if we build a new bridge, even if it's bigger, if we have tolls and light rail, we'll actually have less traffic in 30 years crossing that bridge than if we did nothing. Of course, in the 30 years, it's over 15 hours on the existing bridges because there's not a lot of capacity on those. So according to the IPCC, we are doing the responsible carbon-friendly action here. Plus, we need to be responsible. We have to recognize that we do have to invest in our infrastructure. We can't let our infrastructure continue just to deteriorate and fall apart. One of those bridges is 90 years old. By the time this project would finish, if it goes ahead, it'll be 100 years old. The towers that support the lift span, and actually the whole bridge, and the next time you think about it, next time you go across it, think about this, those things that look very substantial, those pilings going down there are made of stone. Okay, they're sitting on 60-foot long Douglas fir logs stuck in the mud. Okay, and I just actually found out yesterday, San Francisco, the Bay Bridges in San Francisco are on the same structure. The East Bay Bridge they're replacing, half that bridge they're replacing, it's $6 billion just for the bridge, and they're doing it because of seismic concerns in California. Of course, they've had a fairly recent earthquake, which we haven't had for a while. Of course, we're waiting for the big one. So here's 1 minute? Okay, let me summarize real quickly how I think we are. First of all, and how I got to where we are, and how the task force voted 37-2 to move ahead with the current recommendation. The first question was, is the bridge broken and does it need to be replaced? And by broken, I mean, all the problems, safety, congestion, dirty stormwater coming off of it, the drawbridges stopping traffic, the deterioration of the bridge. And the answer of the committee was, yes, it's broken. We need to do our job and replace it. The second question was, if it's broken, what's the best package we can get at a price we can afford? And we looked at a 43 different variety of options out there. And we settled on, let's get light rail on there, and let's use tolls to both manage demand and help pay for it. And that tolling piece, I think, is key here. There is no other project in the region that we can look at that says that we can pay a significant part of it through user fees. This is a way that we can actually get the people who benefit from this, both freight and commuters and those tourists that are coming through, to help pay for this bridge. And so that's, I think, really important. Also, we'll get bike and ped improvements to get across the river, and I biked across that a number of times. Actually, it's a great ride if you're not scared of heights and narrow roads and cars running into you. It's great. Great ride. And this will be able to get that. You'll get light rail connecting in what will be the second largest concentration of employment and housing, which is downtown Vancouver, second largest in the region. So this is the right thing to do at the right time, and I know it's a big thing to swallow, but it's been studied well. We've had a great committee that's analyzed all the pieces of this thing here and have made a recommendation to move ahead with replacing the bridge and providing light rail and putting tolling on it. So I hope it helps explain it. 10 minutes to do a 3-year process is tough, but thank you for holding out to it. And again, thanks for your interest in it.
You know, we're justly proud that Portland is the greenest, most livable city in the United States. And that's no accident. It's the product of decisions that we made. And today we face another important decision. I'm here today because I believe that spending $4 billion on a massive freeway bridge would be a tragic mistake at a critical time that would take our city and our region in exactly the wrong direction. I believe we face the whoops moment for our region's transportation system. You all remember WHOOPS, the Washington Public Power Supply System? It was the product of an extensive planning process, led by an engineering bureaucracy obsessed with mega projects, mindlessly predicting the endless continuation of past unsustainable trends, and telling us that we faced economic ruin unless we went deeply into debt to build that mega project. And that WHOOPS project, as you all know, produced the single largest bankruptcy in municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history, and plunged our region into policy chaos and energy for nearly a decade. Now, the project that Rex talks about is justified in a 5,000-page environmental impact statement. And I want to give you a brief literature review of that document in case you don't all read it. I think it compares most favorably actually to the work of Proust and Remembrance of Things Past. It's interminably long, written in a foreign language, obsessed with a bygone time, and largely a work of fiction. And the project that it talks about is really conceived, designed, and only makes sense in a world that we know no longer exists. It is out of step with the world where gasoline costs more than $4 a gallon because all of its assumptions are based on a world of $1 or $1.25 a gallon gas. It ignores the real need to deal with climate change in a dramatic way. It ignores the fact that development trends are changing very dramatically. It assumes not only that growth will continue and sprawl will continue and traffic will continue to grow, but their projections suggest that the rate of growth will actually double, essentially, from the rate that we've experienced in the last 10 years. So this isn't a conservative projection, it is a wild-eyed projection based on trends that we now know are not going to happen. Second critical point is that it is really not consistent with our vision of what we want for the future of our region. Now, we all know that congestion in the I-5 corridor is caused by one thing and one thing alone: our dysfunctional relationship with Clark County and the rest of the region. There is a 7-to-1 flow of commuters from Washington to Oregon, and all this project does is assume that that will continue forever and that we will need to provide for it. 46,000 people a day come from Washington to Oregon, only 8,000 Oregonians work in Washington. And what their plans call for is for that trend not only to continue but to accelerate. 93% of the growth in Clark County and in people who will use this new project will be in what the EIS calls the suburban fringe of Clark County. And it assumes that no matter how bad congestion gets in Clark County, that more and more people will continue to move to the suburbs. That's clearly inconsistent with the goal that we have for our region in terms of land use planning. And it is also inconsistent with the objective of dealing with greenhouse gases in a meaningful way. This project would increase vehicle miles traveled or contribute to increasing vehicle miles traveled by 40% at a time when both Oregon and Washington say that we need to reduce our greenhouse gases by 75% or more. Now, one of the critical failings of this project is its inability or its reluctance to deal with the issue of induced demand. And induced demand is simply the observation that there's an intimate relationship between the transportation we invest in and the way our communities develop. Building more capacity will produce more sprawl in Clark County. There's no question about that. And thanks to the reporting of Dylan Rivera in the Oregonian, we know that this project, as an assumption in their modeling, was told to assume that this project will have absolutely no impact on land use patterns in Clark County at all. That's clearly an unrealistic assumption, and it flies in the face of what this region has known for more than 3.5 decades, and what was the critical issue in vetoing the Mount Hood Freeway. That you shouldn't build transportation facilities only to serve traffic that will exist only if you build the transportation facilities. And finally, we know that building this project simply won't resolve the traffic problems. Like Rex, I bicycle under the I-5 bridge between Irvington and downtown Portland. Like Rex, I observed those bottlenecks. But those bottlenecks are not a result of the Columbia River crossing or the I-5 bridge. They're a result of the fact that at the Rose Quarter, I-5 narrows to 4 lanes. And there's nothing this project does about this except to fuel even more traffic into that very narrow bottleneck. Now, there are a lot of issues that have been raised about freight, about seismic and safety issues, and I'm going to suggest that they're all red herrings. The real issue here is congestion, and if we can relieve congestion, and we think there are ways to do that, then a lot of those problems go away. Now, you should know that freight is important, but 85 to 90% of the freight in the I-5 corridor already moves at non-peak hours and in the non-peak direction. Second, you should know that while people have claimed that this is the most dangerous bridge on the I-5 system, ODOT's own safety numbers show that the accident rate on the I-5 bridge is no higher than it is on the Markham Bridge and is actually considerably lower than it is on the Fremont Bridge. Now, obviously, we need to worry about a big earthquake, but you can actually fix this bridge. And you can fix this bridge for about the same cost that this project would spend on tearing down the existing bridges. They've budgeted $155 million just to demolish 2 homely, but actually very serviceable bridges. And I want to disagree vehemently with Rex that this would be the recommendation of the International Panel on Climate Change. They do not recommend massive investments in additional freeway capacity. If fixing the bridge is the issue, then let's spend the money on bringing it up to the 2,500-year seismic standard, which can be done for between $100 and $200 million. Let's focus for a minute on the size of this project. $4 billion is a difficult number to wrap your minds around. The good way to think about it is, as you leave the room today, please leave $2,000 on the table, because that is your share of the cost of this bridge. $2,000 per person for the $4 billion, for the 2 million people in this region is the equivalent of the $4 billion we would spend on that project. Now, they've been remarkably vague on who will actually pay for this bridge. You haven't gotten your bill yet. This is a bridge, it seems, that everybody wants as long as they think someone else will pay for it. And they've said in very vague terms that they expect the money to come from 3 sources. From federal earmarks, the mother of all federal earmarks, $600 million is what the EIS projects, from tolls, and from state and local taxes. Now, we heard just last week from the Washington Secretary of Transportation that rather than the $600 million that's projected in the EIS, we can expect no more than $125 million from the federal government. That leaves another $500 million hole that we have to fill. They also anticipate raising $1 billion or so from bonds. But those bonds are contingent on Wall Street's willingness to lend against future toll revenues, and they have not done an investment-grade revenue forecast, the kind of forecast that's different from the sort of stated income forecast, which is what they've done so far. And then finally, in terms of the local match, to get the local match that's needed, you would have to levy the equivalent of a 15-cent a gallon gas tax on everyone in this region for the next 30 years. They also anticipate going deeply into debt for this project, like whoops. 80% of the $3 billion cost of the highway bridge would have to be borrowed. That means hundreds of millions of dollars in interest payments coming out of money that could otherwise go for transportation projects. And borrowing also creates the risk that if revenues from gas taxes and tolls are not as high as their optimistic projections, this project gets in line ahead of every other single transportation project in the region. And also, if we incur cost overruns, which is a real possibility, ODOT's current biggest project, the Highway 20 straightening, has a 33% cost overrun. A 33% cost overrun on this project would produce $1 billion in additional costs. And once we embark on building this project, we borrow the money, we're totally at risk for whatever cost overruns there may be. And this poses a real issue in terms of what economists call opportunity costs. The $4 billion we spend on this project is $4 billion we do not have to spend on every other need in the region. And even if there were a 1 cent a gallon gas tax increase in each of the next 10 years, it's estimated that our region has a $7 billion deficit, not counting this bridge. Now, we think there are really viable alternatives in this to spending $4 billion. For a much reduced level of money, we could fix the existing bridge, modify the ramps, extend transit in 2 steps, first to Hayden Island and then across the river, and finance it with a much lower level of tolls on the existing structure, and do that in a way that would seriously deal with the congestion problem that we face. Now, when you think about how to spend $4 billion, it's a lot of money. And the question I would ask Rex is this. Rex, if you had $4 billion on this podium today and you could spend it in any way to improve the quality of life in our region, how would you spend it? Would you put all of it in this bridge?
We'll now have rebuttal comments from Rex and then Joe after Rex is completed. Thank you.
So you got it, 2 sides of a story. I think the key thing here, I would say to Joe, is there's what we'd like to see the world to be, and then there's the world as it is. And I think the committee that worked on this for 3 years dug into and asked these questions, asked about alternatives. Of course, they all choked, of course, on the price, right? And can we make this happen? And will we be able to solve the problems that we've identified in any other way than what was before the committee's recommendation? And the answer to that group was no. And it's not just me. Again, I'm one member of that large committee. And we looked at these issues in depth. And again, I guess I'll refer to Joe and his reference to the Oregonians that I've learned a long time ago, because I read the comics every day, that you can't believe everything you read in the paper. And that the issue of growth is definitely part of this discussion, and the issue of land use is definitely part of this discussion. But again, how we grow is not a modeling question, it is a political question. And I think that's something you can't answer in a process like this, and that we shouldn't expect it to do that. That's really the decision of the elected officials on both sides of the river about how that happens. And then again, I think the issue is it's not a problem of Vancouverites commuting here. Okay? It's a problem of the system is breaking down. The system is full and breaking down today without that 1 million more people that we expect to live here in 20 years. And we need to be, and this is my role, and it's not a very comfortable role, let me tell you. I used to be an advocate for bicycles, and I could every day just go to work and say, how do I make bicycles more part of the lives of the people in this area? I don't care about all the other stuff. Today, I am an elected official at the regional government, and my responsibility is to look to the future and to say, how do we accommodate the large number of people moving here and do it in a responsible way? Just as we will build houses for those 1 million more people, we'll build schools and business places. All those create the same issues of congestion, the same issues of carbon dioxide emissions, the same issues of energy use. We will have to deal with those, and we have to deal with them in a responsible way. We can't say, let's not bother. Let's forget about it. And then finally, I do want to hit the $4.2 billion monster. Okay, the current projections are, I think, $3.3 to $3.6 billion because one of the light rail lines have been shortened. And I want to tell you, this is not a $4.2 billion bridge. This is a $1 billion plus light rail project. It is a $1 billion plus or minus bridge project, and then a couple $1 billion interchange improvement project. So we want to break these things down because it is not as scary as people think it is. And there are pieces here that we will be looking at in the next year through the final environmental impact statement about exactly what is affordable, what can we do, and how to phase things in, how to make things fit with our communities, and how to make sure the bridge actually, and this big project, actually makes our communities much better. And I think we have a lot of opportunities too. One, I'll end on this real quickly. The Hayden Island community has been going through a long process about saying, what do they want to be? Okay, do they really want to be the power center for Vancouver shoppers? Or do they want to be a fully developed community? And they've adopted a community plan that is mixed-use development, street grids, everything you'd love to see. A great community on the island, one of the most beautiful places there. It can't happen without this bridge because you can't get on or off the island today, much less having a lot more people there and a lot more activity going on. With light rail and the new bridge in place, then Hayden Island can achieve its dreams. And that's just one little piece of this. Downtown Vancouver is looking at knitting its two halves back together again as part of this process by covering the freeway there. That won't happen unless you have a revenue flow and a project that you can count on for that. So there's a lot here that we can use this as an opportunity to leverage a better place to live, as well as take care of responsibilities to our children to not just say, you guys get to figure out how to fix this problem next year or next decade.
You know, I agree with Rex on one thing, and it is critical that we see the world as it is. And this is a project that was designed with the mindset of the 1950s and not designed for the world that we know we will have to live in 2050. Its transportation projections are based on gasoline at $1 or $1.25 a gallon. There's no assumption about, or no treatment of how we're going to deal with climate change and how we're going to meet our legislatively adopted goal of reducing greenhouse gases by 75%. We do need to plan for the world that we will live in. And just as 35 years ago, we went to the brink with the Mount Hood Freeway, and ODOT was on the verge, they had already acquired property, they had the money in hand. We pulled the plug on it and we went a different direction. And we took the money that we would have spent on that freeway and we spent it on taking the first steps towards light rail and making Portland the great city that it is today. And I think it would be a tragic mistake to continue with this project and to devote the money, that $4.2 billion, to what amounts to a huge bridge. And it is not just the bridge, it is freeway, about 5 miles of freeway and intersections. Rex is right about that. But $3 billion or more of the $4 billion is strictly for the highway components of the project. And the question we need to ask ourselves, and the one that Rex didn't answer, is if we had $4 billion on our tables today and could use it to plan and build for the world we know we will be living in 2050, how would we spend it? For your $4 billion, you could buy 200 miles of streetcar. For your $4 billion, you could do a massive increase in the transit system here. And we have other needs like widening Highway 217 and so on. There are lots of other things that we could spend it on. And as the City Club noted in the report you unanimously adopted a few moments ago, we can't get there by a patchwork system of deciding project by project. We have to have a vision of what our future is like. And going ahead with this project really works against the kind of vision we have for our region. It's based on a vision that assumes that Clark County continues to have this profoundly dysfunctional relationship with the rest of the region, where it's just a bedroom community and where people commute, and they commute from low-density, single-family dwellings in suburban fringe Clark County via single-occupancy vehicles over this new and wider bridge, which will be just as congested as it is today because they've done nothing to fix the bottlenecks that exist here in the center of Portland. Now, I want to have you all cast your minds ahead just a few months to January of 2009, when we'll have a new federal administration, a new federal government. And I can see the possibility that President Obama will, my friend Bill Bishop will explain to you why that's a cheap, in 2 weeks, why that's such a cheap joke here at City Club. But you can imagine that President Obama calls a meeting and he invites his new transportation secretary, Earl Blumenauer, to sit down with the leaders of America's greenest city as they consider the reauthorization of federal transportation legislation. And at that meeting, they will know that this is the biggest rewrite of the federal highway transportation bill since Eisenhower was president. And President Obama will reflect on the crowd of 75,000 people that he saw in Portland and the great city that he visited, and he will ask Congressman Blumenauer and Mayor Adams and Metro Council President David Bragdon and Governor Kulongoski, what can the nation learn as it embarks on reauthorizing transportation legislation? What are the Portland lessons for what our transportation policy and funding ought to be? And that'll be a good question. And if we go ahead with the Columbia River crossing, our answer to that question will be, President Obama, the solution or the direction that federal transportation legislation needs to take in the next session is to have a $600 million earmark for a highway bridge. That's not the kind of vision that I think Portland has. I don't think that's the kind of contribution we want to make about the national debate about cities, about urban living, and about the kind of investments we need to make in transportation. And I hope you'll join me in becoming an ardent opponent of the Columbia River crossing and suggest that we need to move in a very, very different direction if we're going to have the great city that we love. Thanks.
Our first question of our two speakers will be from our board host today. Our board host is Leslie Morehead. Leslie is a consultant providing financial management services for small businesses. She holds a master's from Reed College and an MBA and PhD from PSU. Leslie.
Thank you, Jim. This question is intended for both our speakers, but I'll say to Rex, this question is about the beauty of the bridge, and given Joe's position, I think this might be a question about the beauty of the beast. Important bridges have the potential to become an iconic statement of place that people all over the country admire and love. Examples include the Brooklyn Bridge, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, the Mackinac Bridge across the Great Lakes, and of course the greatest of them all, the Golden Gate. The reason these bridges are so loved is their architectural magnificence. A thing of beauty is, of course, desirable in and of itself, but regarding the situation we are presenting here, I think one could hold the opinion that making an architecturally magnificent bridge a priority in the planning can alleviate much of the worry about satisfying utilitarian constraints. You can serve the public need by good design, and you can also make people love it and be willing to pay for it. The question is this: in this 21st century financial and regulatory climate, what is the possibility of creating a stunningly iconic bridge across the Columbia?
Okay. I think it's very high. I think because this will be a project that is a product of this community and what we'd like to see happen, there's a possibility of a great bridge there. Now, it may not look like a suspension, it may not be a suspension bridge, is what every one of those that you talked about, and we have this in our mind's eye that only suspension bridges are beautiful. I think there's other things you can do to make a bridge attractive, and especially, as I see it, because again, it's a freeway bridge, you're not going to really pay much attention to it while you're on it, I hope. I hope you more pay attention to the traffic. But the fact that it could become a really wonderful destination in our community as a place to ride your bicycle across, take the transit across, stop in the middle, and take a look at the mountain. Right now, that's one reason I love bridge pedal, because I actually only completed it once in 12 years because I get stuck on top of the Fremont Bridge or the Markham Bridge and just marvel at the wonderful views. And I think you have an opportunity there to create something that allows you to stop and enjoy it, which we don't have on most of our bridges right now. It's going to be a design challenge because we have to have a high enough clearance for the river traffic and low enough clearance for the airfield, which probably means not a suspension bridge, but I don't think that limits beauty. Beauty is not limited by one design.
Yeah, to me, it'd be nice if you build it, it ought to be beautiful. But we should all be aware that the decision about what this bridge is going to look like is in the hands of the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Washington Department of Transportation. If you read the article in the Oregonian today, it's not up to Metro, it's not up to the City Council. Once we sign off on one of the options in the environmental impact statement, then the two transportation agencies are free to build whatever bridge they want, and we don't have any control over that.
Okay, we're now going to go to questions from the floor. Asking questions at City Club Friday forums is a privilege of City Club membership. Please keep your question to 30 seconds or less and end it with one of these as soon as you can.
Chris Smith, City Club member. I'm going to focus on that question of governance and local control. The 39-member task force has finished its job. Governance in the next phase will pass to a project sponsor committee, which on the Oregon side will be the city, Metro, and TriMet. And it's really unclear how much control they have. Yesterday at Portland City Council, a project representative said, yes, all those sponsors will sign off on the design decisions. But Matt Garrett, the Director of Transportation, was quoted in the Oregonian this morning saying, no, the governors were very clear in their letter, that committee will be advisory. So my question is, if Metro and the city vote in the next few weeks for the locally preferred alternative, which includes a bridge up to 12 lanes, will Metro or City Council ever get a chance to vote on the number of lanes, and if so, when?
Well, the resolution that was approved, the recommendation approved by the task force, actually called for a bridge with 3 through lanes, with the number of additional lanes to be decided during the next process, which is the final environmental impact statement process, which will have this local oversight committee. There are, a project of this scale and size, actually, even though you may not, quote, have a formal vote at this advisory committee, there are actions that need to be taken by each of these bodies. City of Portland giving land use permission, Metro making an amendment in its regional transportation plan, and that goes through JPAC, the Joint Policy Advisory Committee, and Transportation as well, that are required for it to move ahead. And then also, to get federal dollars, it needs to be a consensual action as well, to go and ask our federal delegation for help gathering dollars. And we've been told in no uncertain terms in the federal delegation that if you don't agree on something, we're not going to work to help you get the money. And that includes the transit side, which could be up to $750 million. So I guess I come from the Midwest, so I believe in clean government and transparency, and I am an optimist. So I hope that we can be at the table and help shape these decisions, and you wouldn't have a 1970s process, like when Glenn Jackson drew a line through East Multnomah County and said, that's the freeway and this is the bridge design. The world has changed since then, and that DOTs actually are much more dependent on our local cooperation participation than ever before in the past, and therefore we'll work together closely.
I'm not so quick to trust the departments of transportation, and part of the reason comes from just the description of the bridge. They will tell you it's not a 12-lane bridge. There are really only, as Rex just said, only 3 through lanes in each direction, because there are 3 auxiliary lanes in each direction as well. And that can only charitably be described as Orwellian in terms of its description. It is a 12-lane bridge. The EIS is of a 12 or 14-lane bridge. And once you sign on, once you approve that option, it's, again, up to the discretion of the transportation agencies how big that bridge is.
Leslie Carlson, City Club member. And my question is about the data that's been used in the EIS to predict demand for the bridge. I'm wondering, with VMTs down all over Oregon, traffic over the I-5 bridge is down, gas consumption in the Pacific Northwest is down 18%. We're heading towards $5 a gallon. Why have you used $1 or $1.25 a gallon to model this bridge? Why can't you get some updated data and sort of look to the future?
Well, I'm not a data guy, but let me tell you what, this, actually that's a misconception. The models that we run, well, there's two things about it. One is that there's an agreed upon regional growth forecast, a 2035 growth forecast that Clark County and Metro use for all our planning analysis. That's basically, is the basis for the description of what's going to happen in terms of growth and such. So that's the base model that looks at growth and how it's going to change. The other part is on the cost, we don't look in the models at the price of gas. What we look at is the cost per mile of driving. And let me give you an example. It has tended to stay very flat, relatively flat over time, because the fleet will change. Price of gas goes up. Exactly what you see happening today is that the trucks and the SUVs are sitting on the parking lots of the dealers. People are buying more efficient vehicles. You go from a F-250 that gets 10 miles a gallon, you can triple your mileage, therefore third your cost by buying a Toyota Corolla. And that's what happens, is that people will change what the fleet mix will change, and so that their cost stays about the same. And so that's what we use to model, not the price of gas. And modelers, did I get that right? Yeah. Okay. Again, I'm channeling the modelers, who write the models. Now, models aren't perfect, and that's why this is a political process as well. Is that we talk, and I want to push back. We did not approve a 12-lane bridge yesterday, or on Tuesday night. We approved a 3-lane bridge with the auxiliary lanes to be examined, and if I don't want to open it up because it takes so much time, but that the goal of the auxiliary lanes are only to permit safe merging and movement and not to create new throughput capacity. That's the recommendation of the task force. The task force has addressed these issues. And there will be change, and I think there's some confusion here too about VMT, vehicle miles traveled versus number of vehicles. Many of these trips are short. If you look at the airport, 4,000 people work at the airport every day. Where's the closest population center to the airport? Well, there's two. There's Northeast Portland, Collie Boulevard area, and East Vancouver. If you drive from Gresham, that's twice as far. If you drive from Clackamas, it's 4 times as far. Actually, Vancouver is close to that job center. So many of those trips are very short. I believe 75% of the trips are on and off within the bridge influence area. So it's not long distance trips that happens here. So the data, again, as Joe said, it's a 5,000-page DEIS. The summary is 400 pages. And it is a lot of data in there, which this committee has wrestled with over the last 3 years and asked and probed and hopefully have answered all these questions, but similar to yours. Thank you.
I would just say a lane is a lane is a lane. It adds capacity no matter what you call it. The model that they use is literally calibrated from travel behavior when people were paying $1 or $1.50 a gallon of gas. There's a cost variable in there, but they have not ramped it up to reflect today's prices. Their assertion is, and actually there isn't evidence for this, the historical record is exactly the opposite, that their assertion is that the only response that anybody will make to the change in gas prices is to buy a more fuel-efficient car. It will have zero effect on travel behavior. You know from your own experience, and Leslie, you cited the data, travel is already going down, and we can expect it to go down much more rapidly in the next decade, both because of fuel prices, but also because we have constraints on carbon as well. So don't expect the models that you have are very well intentioned, but they're based on a time period that is now a distant memory.
Thank you.
Ray Polania, City Club member. This study was a $50 million study. Why was no serious consideration given to repair or reconstruction of the old 1907 railroad bridge that is in far worse shape than the 2 freeway bridges and carries both freight and Amtrak that are essential to this region economy? Commuter rail service on the Burlington Northern Railroad between Union Station and Vancouver Station. Why not?
Well, they were. And hold down your clapping, because I think it's a misconception that they weren't studied. Again, as I said, this is a second part of a very long study that has been going on, the I-5 Trade and Transportation Partnership Study. And that recommendation did talk about rail improvements in that area because that's obviously a key. And a lot of that's actually been done through the Connect Oregon program. Millions of dollars have gone into what's called the Portland Triangle in terms of improving freight movement. Now the bridge itself, the large bridge that's privately owned, was examined as well in a variety of different ways. One was to replace it and having a mixed bridge with arterial traffic as well as improvements for the rail traffic. The issue, though, was that again, if you think about this as narrowing down, we started with this very large project that looked at the whole area and all the problems in the area, including the rail, including the roads, including marines. And you looked at those, and some actions were taking place on Delta Park, for example, the rail pieces. And then the question still remained, what are we going to do about this bridge issue? And the bridge was the I-5 bridge. And so when the projects looked at the railroad bridge, they actually found it had very little impact on solving the problems actually on the I-5 bridge. Obviously, the problems of safety and the condition of the bridge wouldn't be solved by fixing the railroad bridge. It is an issue, and I'll say over and over again, we have a major infrastructure issue in this state and in this country. We're spending half of what we did in the 60s and 70s on infrastructure. And we have this great legacy given to us by our predecessors in infrastructure, and we're letting it all fall to pieces. Pick the Selwood Bridge, pick the street in front of your house. We're not putting money into maintenance, and that's because we're choosing not to raise our gas taxes, and we're choosing not to raise revenue. Here we have an opportunity to have a user fee, mostly financed improvement. And I think it's a great opportunity, and we should take advantage of it.
We have time for just one last question. Joe, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the DIS process gives you only two choices: keep the existing bridge or build a giant highway bridge. They systematically eliminated from consideration any intermediate alternatives, and there are lots of them, and it was clear that it was done with the priority of getting a highway bridge.
One last pithy question.
Robert Liberty, City Club member, Metro Council member. In December, the Metro Council adopted the Federal Regional Transportation Plan and identified a $7 billion shortfall for capital projects, not including Columbia River Crossing. My question to both presenters today is, should this be the #1 priority, given the $7 billion shortfall for capital projects? If not, how do we make decisions between these and other projects competing for a very limited supply of money?
Do you want that one, Joe? I took the last one.
Well,
first.
I'll just say, I don't think this is by any stretch of the imagination where we would ought to be the highest priority. There are lots of other priorities in this region, and the idea that we would essentially commit to a big mega project, it's $4 billion is the price tag, there could be an overrun. And the risk is that if all those projections aren't met, then it ties up all of our transportation capital for the next couple of decades. And at this time, with the level of uncertainty in the economic environment and the political environment, it's not the time to sign that giant promissory note and essentially fritter away all of our ability to deal with the future.
Well, I think it's a false choice. This project, as I said a number of times, has the potential to be mostly self-financing. And that's through the tolling mechanism, and we have a captive audience, folks. People have to get across the river. It is the I-5 corridor, and to be honest, we'll probably be talking about tolling the 205 bridge as well to be able to make this thing possible. So you're looking at a captive audience, so if you're looking at financing this through tolls, this is how it will happen. The other funds that we're looking at to getting the $750 million for transit and up to $500 million in the corridors of the future from the federal government, those are not available for anything else. So really this is not competing with the other needs in the region. And I think if it was, I think you'd have a quite different picture here, but it's not. And it will have to stand on its own in terms of being able to finance itself and raising dollars from the federal government. So I think it's a false choice here. We have lots of needs out there. Very few have this opportunity to both attract some federal capital. It is the interstate freeway system, after all, and also to be financed by tolls. And I think tolls are coming as a way of managing our traffic demand in this region, period. We'll have to look at like New York and Stockholm, and Seattle's actually looking at San Francisco area. Tolling is going to be there, and that's another issue totally on the side of this one, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here to actually make this thing happen and do it in an environmentally sensitive way.
We have to end it there. Like many of you, I've been coming to City Club Friday forums for many years. Our political debates are usually debates. Often when we have these sort of policy debates, they're not really debates. I think we got to give a lot of credit to our two speakers today for obviously caring a lot about this and speaking their minds. We kind of know that there's more than one position on this issue, and that's a very important contribution to the public dialogue. So Rex Burkholder and Joe Cortright, thank you very much. We are adjourned. See you in 2 weeks.